How's everyone doing? Welcome back to U.S. history. Hope everyone had a nice long weekend. Um, Today we are going to be kicking off Unit 2 of our study of U.S. history. And as you can see at the top, Unit 2 is titled The Revolutionary Era. Okay, so this concept of revolution is going to be very central to this unit. And really, our goal today is trying to link Unit 1, so that unit we just finished where we studied colonial America, to where Unit 2 is going. One of the things we want to stress is that in US history, this is kind of a continual story. Just because we finished with Unit 1 focusing on colonial America, that doesn't mean that we have to just stop right there and move on to a different topic. We really want to focus on connecting these units and connecting these stories and figuring out how there are multiple connections throughout US history. Okay, so we'll get into our work for today. So, our aim, how can we identify the impact of the Proclamation of 1763 through using maps and source material? Okay, so our key concept for today is the Proclamation of 1763. We're going to use some maps and some sources to figure out what the impact of this proclamation was. Okay, so now our do now is reflecting back on the last topic we learned about in Unit 1. So this is where we're trying to build those connections. So our do now is kind of three different parts. You can answer these in brief statements, but it's why was the French and Indian War fought? What were the two sides that fought? And remember, each side has two participants. All right, so the one side has two people or two groups. The other side has two groups. So there's four total groups you should be focusing on. All right, and then the final question is who won? So which of these sides ends up winning the French and Indian War? So you can pause the video right now if you need to go back to your assignment from last week. That's more than fine. But we'll pick up at the fast facts together. Okay, so for our fast facts today, all right, we have some reminders from where we just came from. So the colonists assisted the British during the French and Indian War, all right, which resulted in the British gaining large amounts of land west of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, so the British and the colonists win this war, and it gets the British a lot more land in colonial America. So this is seen as initially a very big victory for the British. One problem emerges though. So after the war, so an effect of the war, we have an effect right here, is that the British are in a large amount of debt. And debt is when you do not have money, you owe money. Okay, so even though the amount of land that is gained is a very positive thing for the British, a very negative thing also is an effect from the war, and that's a lot of debt. Wars cost a lot of money. Okay, so now the British have this problem. They say, we have all this land, but we need to make up this money as quick as possible. How are we going to do this? Okay, so bullet three. Fearing that the colonists would move into this new land and potentially have conflicts with Native Americans, the British created a plan to limit colonist movement. So the British see this new land as a blessing and a curse. It's great that they're able to take land from the French, but they're also nervous that colonists will move into this new land and it'll lead to more problems between the Native Americans and the colonists. And the British know, well, if our colonists are getting into fights, if they're getting into battles with the Native Americans, we're going to have to send troops over. We're going to have to pay even more money to help them fight the Native Americans. So the British see this as a potentially large cost. Okay, so the plan that is created by the British is the Proclamation of 1763. And what this did is it banned colonists from moving into the newly gained land, which is west of the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, so the British say, well, we can stop this potential conflict between the colonists and the Native Americans if we ban the colonists from moving out into this new land. So that's the proclamation. It's limiting colonist movement. All right, and the reaction of the proclamation is that this angered colonists. All right, and they believe they were entitled to this land after they helped the British fight the French and Indian War. The colonists say, well, we helped fight this war. We helped secure this new land. We should have the opportunity to move out there if we want to, right? And when the British, the mother country, tells them you can't go to this new land, the colonists are rightfully angered. Okay, there's a lot of tension, a lot of anger that grows from this proclamation. Okay, so now a map just to kind of highlight this, and as we've looked at in Unit 1, we see that the colonial holdings of the British are all along the East Coast. Okay, so all the purple, green, and orange areas are the original colonial settlements for the British. Once the French and Indian War is fought, let me change the color here just so it's a little more clear. We see that the British now control all the land that is surrounded by the blue. So all this land here. And the colonists who live, let's say if I'm living in Pennsylvania right here, and I helped fight in the French and Indian War, I hear this news as great news. I can now move into this land out here. What the Proclamation of 1763 does, though, is it bans that movement. And I'm going to show you guys that line. So if we look at the key, all right, we look here, the Proclamation line of 1763 is this red line. I'm going to draw over it with the yellow. This line bans the movement of colonists, and it reserves this land for the Native Americans. So the British create this line, and this is a hard boundary now that colonists are not allowed to move across. And once again, colonists are angered by this limiting action. Okay, so what you guys are going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at the Proclamation of 1763 through a couple of different lenses. Okay, so we have two readings, and this first reading here is focused more so on how the French and Indian War leads to even more conflict between the British and the colonists. And this is really focusing on connecting Unit 1 into Unit 2, okay? So think about those connections. What's happening from what we talked about in Unit 1, and how is it impacting the relations between the British and the colonists, all right? You have some analysis questions down below, all right? The second source you're using is a primary source, and this is actually coming from the Royal Proclamation of 1763. So this is a primary source. This is the actual language of the declaration that the British create to limit the movement of the colonists. So once again, we're going to read the questions first, turn them into a sentence starter. Then we're going to go back to the text, underline as we find information. Then we're going to be plugging the answer in, okay? One thing that's a little different, this last question is more opinion based, okay? Make sure you're explaining your opinion, making it clear why you believe the answer you have chosen, okay? Today and Wednesday are in-person teaching days, so we will not have Zoom office hours during class because I'll be teaching students in person. All right. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always comment in the document and I'll respond as soon as possible, or you can shoot me an email. All right. I hope everyone is doing well, and I will talk to you soon.